Hi, this is Scott with the BC Academy. Today we will be discussing BC.Next and what you need to know. Topics that we will be discussing include the new rendering engine, module and named parameters, BC rendered data in JSON format, liquid markup language support, suppressing the BC injected JavaScript and CSS files, the new admin editor, and finally site performance and static asset headers. Let's get started going over the new rendering engine in Business Catalyst and what this means for you. But first, let's take a look at the current status of the transition of Business Catalyst sites to the new rendering engine. This process started at the end of January. At the time of this tutorial, Business Catalyst has migrated all hosted sites on North America and European data centers. The only remaining sites are those hosted with Web Commerce Plan located on the Australian data center. When the BC team set out to build the new rendering engine, it was important that they maintain backwards compatibility in order to make sure that all current sites within Business Catalyst did not break. The team spent many hours testing a large sample of websites provided by the BC community in order to ensure backwards compatibility requirements were met. If you are a current Business Catalyst user and you would like the way you build sites, you have the option to continue business as usual. You can still develop and implement your sites into Business Catalyst in the same ways. If you want to get started with BC.Next and the new rendering engine, let's talk about some of these new features individually. First, BC has made improvements to the module tag within Business Catalyst. You'll notice that the old module tag is a series of parameters that are separated by commas. This often made it difficult to set up our module and made it even more challenging to come back later and understand what the module is outputting. With the new module named parameters, it is a lot more practical to implement and understand. Each parameter is named, making it easier to specify what you want to output, as well as making it easier for a developer or user to more easily understand what information that module tag is outputting. A few important takeaways to know about the new module syntax is that you do not need to include parameters that are not relevant. Only include the parameters that are required to output the desired information. Also, you have the ability to rearrange parameters as they do not need to be outputted in the order that is documented. For those interested in learning more about the new module with named parameters, you can check out our other video tutorial on this topic. The next thing you should know about the new rendering engine is that BC now renders everything on a page in JSON format. This provides an intuitive way to grab that data and manipulate data to your liking in order to output information in a very flexible manner. I think a great example of this is the ability to take the photo gallery module outputted information and have the ability to extract the data and create whatever types of layouts you need. In this example on the screen, you'll see the default way BC outputs information, which requires you to use their built-in lightbox, as well as having to work around the HTML it outputs the pictures in. With JSON, we can access the data and pull only the information we need and wrap it in the HTML that we want. This means we have full control to create any type of photo gallery we choose. So the final result being that I can have my own custom jQuery lightbox plugin, as well as wrap my content in whatever HTML markup that I would like. The next major development with BC.Next is Liquid templating support. So you'll see in my last example I use Liquid in order to access my JSON data. Liquid markup language is an easy to understand coding language that allows front-end developers to access and manipulate server-side data before it gets outputted on the page. With Liquid, you are given greater control over what information you want to access and total creative freedom with how it gets outputted. Some great examples of the power of Liquid include using Liquid to run if statements that determine what information should be outputted for different users. For example, we can show two different layouts depending on if a user is logged in or if they're not. You might be saying, hey, I know a trick before Liquid that allowed me to do this, and this is true. However, these techniques weren't always the cleanest and best for performance. Most of the time, the information was rendered on the page and required the use of JavaScript to show and hide this content, which could lead to security problems if you actually wanted to hide the content from certain users. There were some other workarounds within Business Catalyst, but these were merely hacks meant for advanced users. Liquid gives you an intuitive way to do this now. Some other quick examples of the power of Liquid include Liquid filters, which allow you to alter the way things are outputted, like dates, changing text to remove unwanted characters, or truncating words or letters after a certain number of characters, even splitting a string of text into an array in order to further control and format your information on the page. You can now also filter out items in a module by a particular field. Say, for example, you have a media library of resource items like PDF downloads, videos, press releases, etc. You can use Liquid to filter out and display only videos. If you're interested in learning more about Liquid, I have provided some great resources in this presentation that you can go and check out, and I will also include links in the resource download section of this tutorial. Moving on from Liquid, another big update in BC.Next is the ability to suppress BC-injected JavaScript and CSS files. If you've been building sites on Business Catalyst and have ever viewed source on your page, then you probably have noticed that BC inserts certain style sheets and script links in the head of your document. These were meant so that many of the built-in modules within Business Catalyst had the necessary basic styling and functionality to work. However, many developers would overwrite these styles or use entirely different layouts with those modules, and therefore rendering this code useless. Until now, we had to deal with these files that would add time onto our page loads and lower our Google page speed scores. Thankfully, we have an option to disable this now. To disable this, you can go into Site Manager, Page Templates, and create or edit a template. Choose more options and check the No Head elements. As a reminder, you will need to do this with every template that you create. One warning that you'll definitely want to be aware of is that if you do enable suppression, certain functionality on your site might not work. The biggest area to watch out for is with e-commerce. At this time, you will not want to suppress the injected elements if you plan on using built-in BC e-commerce functionality, as it will not work without the BC's JavaScript function. Next, we have the new admin editor in Business Catalyst. I will say that I'm glad we have the option to enable and disable some of these new features within Business Catalyst. I'm not quite sure I'm sold yet on the new admin editor. From a strictly developer's perspective, I do like it better. I find that the old editor often would reformat my code or strip out my code entirely. From a typical user perspective, trying to create content in the new WYSIWYG editor, I'm not quite sure is an improvement just yet. There are some features that the old admin editor had that this one does not. I would say play around with it yourself and determine if you think it's a good fit for your clients. The last thing you need to know about BC.Next are the new site performance improvements. One big change with the new rendering engine includes caching dynamic page content in server memory. This means if you're outputting information rendered within a module in Business Catalyst, it will store this on the server's memory for faster access. Of course, if any updates are made to the content, BC knows to invalidate the cache and to serve up the new information. Another site performance improvement includes the static asset headers in Business Catalyst. If enabled, Business Catalyst will now take any assets on your page and append a unique identifier. This basically sets a version of your asset and caches it in the browser, so the next time you load the page, if that unique identifier is the same, the browser will not have to make a round trip and download that information again. It knows that nothing has changed and will load the cached version. This significantly decreases the time it takes to load your page. With BC's unique identifier, it can automatically detect if you've made a change to the asset, whether you've made edits to your script file or uploaded a new image. BC will know this and detect and append a new unique identifier so that the browser downloads and outputs the new assets so your visitors aren't seeing the old content. This also significantly helps to improve Google page speed insight scores for SEO. One limitation at this time is that BC will only append this unique identifier for assets directly in your page or templates. If you have assets contained in content holders, includes, or within modules, these unique identifiers will not be appended. There are some workarounds, and if you're interested in learning about that, you can go check out our other video tutorial on this topic. Whether you're new or a longtime Business Catalyst user, I hope this video provided you with an introduction to BC.Next and what you need to know. Thank you for watching and supporting the BC Academy. Feel free to ask questions or to provide feedback in the comments below. This has been Scott with another BC Academy tutorial.